What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Liam, aka LC Paladin. And you know what? There's only one word on my mind right now, and that's creature feature, baby. Because look, I love good creature feature. I like them. I want them. I want some more of them, all right? One of my personal favorites that comes to immediately off the top of my dome that was made in recent years is Crawl, which is, it's so much fun. Literally just some chick during a flood in Florida trying to survive freaking alligators in her basement, which is just fun, you know what I mean? And look, as someone who lives in Florida, just alligators are just something you just have to be aware of. You just have to. It's just, they're everywhere, bro. But look, I digress, all right? Today, we're going to be making a tier list of some animals who I think have amazing potential for some solid creature features, okay? You know, we're going to be going into it, why I think they would be cool, explaining some of their advantages and disadvantages in horror situations. And you know what? We're just going to have fun with it. Why not, right? All right, so first up, we got hippopotamus. Okay. Real talk, how has a hippopotamus not been made into a creature feature already? Hippopotamus is automatically one of the most dangerous animals in the world. Okay? They kill people every year. Okay? Have you seen their freaking teeth? They're massive. Okay? They are literally submarine tank builds that just happen to live in Africa. Okay? And look, if you're looking for scary animals to put into creature features, or into a creature feature, what kind of animals are you going to find that are going to be more dangerous typically than either Africa or Australia? Because Australia, I'm convinced at this point, is just the underworld, bro. There's every single animal in Australia wants to end you. It's like part of their DNA, okay? So hear me out, all right? We have a movie set in Africa, right? Maybe a family's going on vacation in the savannah. You know, they decide to take a stroll down the Nile, if you will. See the beautiful land of Egypt. Because Egypt is in Africa. For those of you who aren't good with geography, for some reason didn't learn that. But whatever, you know, you don't always think of Egypt as being part of Africa, even though it is. All right? So imagine your family. They're going out for a stroll. They're having a good time. And all of a sudden, oh no, what's that in the distance? You just see some ears and some nose poking up out of the water, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden, this thing is charging you, breaks your boat in half, and then you're trying to survive from a bloodthirsty hippopotamus who, for some reason, has it out for you personally, okay? And don't tell me you've never seen the videos of, like, hippopotamuses. It's such a freaking long name for an animal. A hippo going after the boats. Like, I've literally seen videos of literally hippos going like 20 miles an hour in the water, just trudging after a freaking boat of some tourists. It happens. People die every year to hippos. Okay? All right. Right off the bat, I'm just going to put this in awesome. We're probably going to move hippopotamus up just because of how dangerous they are. Megafauna just in general have huge potential for horror movies. I don't know how someone hasn't thought of it. So we're going to put hippo at awesome. All right, next up, platypus. I already know what you're thinking. Liam, platypus as a horror movie villain sounds so mentally not there. But look, just hear me out. A creature feature does not always have to be something where it's like an animal of a normal proportion, okay? I want to think about the traits of a platypus and what makes them so interesting as a species, okay? They basically, look, right off the bat, yes, they look visually interesting, and so that could be a really cool dynamic in a film, because they look like an animal that somebody taxidermied together. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure when, like, the platypus was first discovered, when they brought, like, the evidence of the animal back to, like, the scientific people at the time, they literally thought he, like, stitched like, a beaver and a duck together. Okay, but no, then he's like, no, this is real. Okay, but look, for those of you who don't know, one of the things that makes platypuses so fascinating as animals, because they have like electro sensors like in their bills, which means they can detect prey and electric movements of like their prey underwater. Because for those of you who don't know, your body produces electrical signals via your nervous system, and so they can sense that. Okay, they would be able to sense you in water, number one. Number two, the males have venomous spurs on the back of their ankles. That's right, a mammal is venomous, for those of you who for some reason didn't know. Okay, yes, there is an animal who can cause you pain by literally... It is a venomous mammal. I don't know what to tell you, okay? And now, hear me out, okay? Here's where things get particularly interesting, all right? It's not even just about the size. If you were to scale this thing up to like the size of a hippo, for example, all right? They have the venomous spurs. They got the electrosensory organs, so to speak, all right? That's not even, it's not even the fact that they're built for both land and water, so they can work in like two environments, which would work really well for a horror movie, in which you would want an animal to go out trudging after its victims. Okay, but then I want you to think about this. Okay, a platypus. Okay, a platypus has so much excess skin, and I know what you're thinking, like, what does skin have to do with this? Okay, think about a grizzly bear. Okay, one of the reasons why a grizzly bear is so dangerous, obviously, other than the giant teeth and size and claws, is the fact that it's so much skin. Do you want to know why so much skin is such an advantage in a survival situation, and to the point why it's so hard to kill a grizzly bear? Okay, because all that skin literally acts like almost like your clothing, like a cushion, right? So if someone comes at me with a knife and they try to like tear at my skin, it's gonna catch the clothes first, and the clothes are gonna move as opposed to my skin. Okay, when you have that much excess skin as an animal, it's gonna make you so much harder to damage. Okay, so I want you to imagine this, right? A platypus the size of a grizzly bear with just as much excess skin as a platypus would have, just sized up. So that means like you're gonna need specialized equipment in order to freaking kill this monstrosity, just like you would a grizzly bear. Okay, it is venomous. It has basically a club-like tail, because not that platypuses naturally have a club-like tails, but they do have beaver-like tails, which are made for pounding like dams, so to speak, even though I don't think platypuses build dams. But like if you're scaling up the sizes, you can dramatize certain features, all right? It would basically be like a giant rod that can just slam down and crush you, okay? Not only that, but you could probably have its like beak be serrated. It is venomous. Again, it can sense you in the water. It can literally sense your electrical signals, bro. This is theoretically, as a creature feature villain, would be terrifying. Terrifying. It would be so cool though, because also like, imagine going to the movie and you just see a poster and it's like, coming this summer, you better run, you better swim, because it can sense you and it's out for the kill. Platypus, coming this summer, 2026. There you go, Hollywood. I just made a movie for you. Now it's your job. I can only do so much. You have to go make it shoo-shoo. Shoo-shoo now, darling. Go make me a good film, because you've run out of ideas, and apparently you need ideas from people like me. But not that all my ideas are like, they're not all going to be like grade A winners, but I'm saying it has some huge potential. So you know what? Platypus has some huge potential. So that's where I'm going to put it, because I just think it'd be cool and it'd be dumb and fun, all right? And sometimes one of the coolest things about a creature feature is you can take animals that wouldn't normally be scary and you can make them scary. Okay? Up next, moose. Okay. For those of you who for some reason have never seen a moose in real life, or at the very least have not seen a moose on the scale of like next to a human being, a moose is another piece of megafauna you don't realize is a megafauna, because in pictures they kind of just look like weird looking deer with big noses. But then you realize how absolutely massive a moose is. They're huge. Like, they're as tall, or as if not taller than a man. Like, and not like an average man, like a tall dude. Like a 6'2", 6'3", 5 dude. They're tall. Okay? And that's like when they're just when they're on all fours, not when theoretically they could stand up to like charge you or whatever. Okay? They're huge. Their antlers are massive and are easily used as weapons, whether for clubbing or stabbing. Okay? You go out into the Alaskan wilderness, or just different wilderness parts of the U.S., like up north, moose are terrifying to the point where literally some people will think they're deer and will want to pet them, and then they wonder why they're in the hospital waking up the next day, and why another family member has been taken out, and it's like, oh wait, because moose are territorial, bro. Don't mess with the moose. Plus, it's funny because you don't expect it to be as dangerous as it is, and that could work really well if you want to do like a horror or a horror comedy. I'm just saying, there's that one movie that got made by the same people who did like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, where they made like a horror movie version of Bambi, which, look, I wanted to see it actually, and I can't find it right now, I don't think. At least as of now. It might be available on streaming. I'd have to look. But look, a deer as a horror villain is actually a very interesting concept, especially when you realize like how gory of a life deers live, whether that be like fighting for mates. Also, for those of you who don't know, When deers grow their freaking antlers, they have like a layer of fuzz around them, which eventually tears off, and it looks super gory because like the fuzz is literally protecting the bones as they're growing, and then as it gets shed off, it looks like just like exposes all this blood because the fuzz is connected to the bone via like blood vessels and all that before it gets torn off, and then you just have the bone of like the rack of the deer. Okay, I don't know if moose work in the exact same way. I think they do, but there's some really cool stuff you could do, like gory details you could do with a moose. I think moose has a lot of potential, and plus, dude, again, it's fun when typically animals that aren't thought of as super dangerous are treated as such. They're wild animals, and they're just massive. You know what? I'm at the very least, I'm going to put moose. It sounds fun. It has more potential than a platypus because platypus is a very specific, like, scaled up version of an animal you would have to do. Like, it gets exposed to, like, a nuclear waste, and then it just, like, hyper evolves or something. But, like, look, it's fun, bro. And you know what? You could do the same thing with the moose. Like, maybe for some reason, like, a moose has to, like, turn to eating meat, and then it just goes on the hunt in the Canadian wilderness. It's fun, bro. All right. Let's be real. All right, next. Snapping turtle. All right, no, specifically, I used the picture for this video of an alligator snapping turtle, specifically because alligator snapping turtles are by far the most dangerous version of a turtle. All right, look. Think about a turtle's strengths, okay? They have typically long-reaching necks, which means they can snap out and grab their prey, which could look very cool dynamically. Excuse me. That could look super cool dynamically, like on the big screen. It's something just all of a sudden you think you're safe, you think it's in its little shell, and then BAM! It just snatches out and gets you. Imagine a giant turtle just all of a sudden coming, its beak coming sideways, and just ripping someone in half. Super easy to do, and obviously they're harder to injure because they have super hard shells, especially alligator snapping turtles. Those things are vicious, bro. An alligator snapping turtle is so dangerous. Have you seen those videos where literally, like, they have them like this? They're gigantic, and then you just, like, hold, like, a huge piece of fruit or, like, a really strong piece of wood in front of them, and then they just come and they just wait, and you just slowly put it in front of them, and bam, snapped, gone. That's your hand if you're not careful. Gone, okay? Alligator snapping turtle, again, if you scale it up, dude, there's so many animals that are scary if you give them the chance. It has a lot of potential, so I am going to put it in a lot of potential. I'm going to put it slightly above platypus because I think a snapping turtle is inherently more dangerous than a platypus because you'd have to do more specific things with the platypus than a snapping turtle. But again, it has potential. We're having fun here, all right? Next up, elephant. All right. I am convinced that the only reason that Hollywood has not made a horror movie about an elephant is because of conservation reasons. Specifically because they don't want to give elephants a bad name in any way, shape, or form because they are endangered, because you want to conserve them, despite all the poachers going around. Which is, look, I just want to take a moment, by the way. I want you to think about like how messed up it is that literally some of the only ways certain really poor peoples in Africa can provide for their families is by killing animals to sell ivory. And then at the same time in doing so, they know that they're actively killing off a really large, beautiful, endangered species. I want you to think about the dichotomy of that. That could actually be a really interesting point you make if you wanted to do some like social commentary in a horror movie. Like maybe like you literally have like the dynamic of like of someone having to do this, having to kill elephants in order to like survive in Africa, especially like the super impoverished parts of Africa where like hunting for ivory and selling ivory, oh my gosh, would be necessary. Like imagine that man's family and then just like the father or the mother of the elephant is just out for revenge. Because look, elephants are known to be super like have super good memories and go out of their way to take people out if they have like memories of them like hurting them or like their family members. I'm pretty sure that there was like this one story that was published on the news about literally a dude who got killed by an elephant specifically because he either went after its family or something like that, and then they held the funeral for the man, and then the elephant went out of its way, not to disrespect the dead, to tip over the casket and like ruin the funeral. I feel bad for laughing, but like when you think about it outside of the reality of the situation, it's a very funny scenario. But elephants are inherently dangerous. I think they're like at least 10 meters tall. They're huge, super powerful tusks. They're, I think, pound for pound, one of the most powerful animals on the planet. And I'm pretty sure I read that like their trunks are so muscular, they can easily lift like 700 pounds. A fully grown elephant? Dude, so dangerous, so much potential. In fact, actually, you know what? I'm going to put it in epic. I think an elephant is... Actually, you know what? No, screw that. I'm going to put elephant in money, bro. The fact that a horror movie hasn't been made about an elephant is actually kind of criminal considering like how iconic and dangerous they are. All right? Next up, silverback gorilla. Okay. Sorry, I'm just thinking immediately about the meme like 100 dudes versus one silverback gorilla. All right, but look, think about it this way, okay? I'm pretty sure one of the tallest silverback gorillas. Okay, this was specifically in captivity, if remembering correct, was like 8.5 feet tall, like standing on its hind legs. What? 8.5 feet tall? Are you kidding? This dude is taller than like freaking Shaq, bro. Which also, have you seen those videos of like Shaq and like when he goes to the zoo, he's like, I can't go to the zoo, man, because the gorillas get mad at me. They all think I'm trying to steal their wives, which is actually true because gorillas in the wild, if they lose a single fight, they lose their kids, they lose like all their mating privileges. And it's actually like a pretty rough existence, I feel like, for a lot of gorillas, for the males at least. But you know what? Look. A gorilla can bench like 1,000+ pounds. They're pound for pound the strongest, and this is true. Like an elephant, I think, is the strongest land mammal total, but proportional to its size, nothing beats a silverback gorilla. Essentially, meaning that if an elephant was the size of a silverback gorilla, it wouldn't be nearly as strong as a silverback gorilla would be just being a silverback gorilla. A silverback gorilla is so strong, they uproot small trees. Okay? Dude, that's why it's such a debate online whether it be a silverback gorilla or 100 dudes, because a silverback gorilla is taking no prisoners once it gets into that aggression mode. It has like 3-4 like inch long canines, bro. It's tearing out your aorta. Actually, you know what? Yeah, epic. I'm going to put in epic. We might move him up. Again, gorilla has huge potential. I feel like one of the reasons a really solid horror movie about a gorilla hasn't been made. And when I mean solid horror movie, I mean specifically like a movie that has a decent budget. It's not a B movie. And I'm not counting King Kong. King Kong is like a giant monster movie, specifically like a kaiju flick. I'm using, in this context, a normal or at least upper, what is possible for the upper size of silverback gorilla just being the villain of a horror movie. I think that has great potential. I'm putting it in epic. All right, next. The Komodo dragon. All right, right off the bat, look, here's the thing. A Komodo dragon, I think originally we didn't think they were venomous. We just thought like that their saliva caused infection like to their prey. Because literally what a Komodo dragon will do is it will come up behind you. It will like bite you on the ankles, and then slowly over time, it'll just like slowly like pursuit predator style you. Kind of like how a lot of humans did, where like we would just like follow an animal, just like have a really good stamina in terms of like just walking until the animal just got so tired of running, it just kind of like stopped moving from exhaustion, and then we just ended it. So that's kind of what a Komodo dragon does, except now we know that they actually have venom. All right, I think that would actually be a really good horror movie, because as opposed to just like going out and like killing, it would be like a more of like a horror thriller, like an intense waiting game, right? Either maybe you or one of your party members is trying to slowly make it back to civilization to get treatment, and this Komodo dragon is just slowly stalking you, and you're getting more tired and more tired and more tired by the day. You're losing little by little blood, even if it's very slow, right? Your legs are starting to cramp up, maybe one's starting to go numb. You know what I mean? You're hungry, you're thirsty, but if you step for too long, it gets a little closer. It wants to get another bite in to accelerate the process. You know what I mean? There's some huge potential with the Komodo dragon, actually. But you know what? Actually, you know what? I think it has so much potential that I'm actually going to put it at minimum. I'm going to put it in awesome, all right? Because it's not just that it has potential. It's that I can guarantee you in the scenario that I've described, you could make a really solid horror thriller flick. All right, next up. Bees. Okay. I'm telling you right off the bat, one of my own, here's the thing, I don't have any phobias, okay? Not the word I would call phobia, because I feel like phobia is a pretty intense, strict word, where it's like paralyzing fear or something, all right? If there's one thing that I am just so not crazy about, there's maybe a couple, and that's maybe like really a lot, like really high heights, and then bees, all right? I think it just stems from when I was a kid. I just didn't have a lot of good experiences with like bees and other stinging insects. And so it's now to the point where I'm an adult, and look, if I have to deal with it, I will. But if there's any way I can get around it, I will. When it comes to like dealing with bees, to the point where like if it comes between I have to guarantee fight off a swarm of angry bees versus an angry dog, I'm actually taking the angry dog. And I know that's not rational completely, but I want you to think about it. One of the things that makes a swarm of bees so scary, because I'm not talking about one singular bee, because there's never just going to be one bee typically in most scenarios. There's at least going to be one or two nearby that you might have to contend with. Okay, it's pretty rare where it's only one. All right? One of the things that makes bees so scary is because they're so small, they're so hard to defeat. Like, look, when you hit a bee, you're hitting it, but there's only so much force that's going to be absorbed just because of the surface area of like your palm or your fist versus a bee. That's one of the reasons why they're so dangerous is because they come in swarms and you have not one enemy, but like thousands. And they're all coming after you, and they all want one thing, and that is to attack you, okay? You amp up the horror factor, maybe make them like a murder hornet, like crossbreeds or something, and I think you have some huge potential. But I know it's not what you immediately think when it comes to bees, but look, bees are... A hive of bees is just not something I want to deal with. It's something I don't think anybody ever wants to deal with, to the point where like when I see people on like TikTok or social media who are like, save the bees, I'm like, I love that because we need pollinators, but also thank you for doing that so I don't have to. But you know what? I know it's a bit of a thinker, so I'm going to put it in and think about it. You know what I mean? I think that's fair. Next up, King Cobra. All right. King Cobra. There's been depictions of giant snakes in media. There's probably even been one of like cobras, but like in terms of like a modern, like, not B-list horror movie. All right? Think about it. What I want a horror movie where it's literally like a king cobra the size of like the one Jafar turns into in Aladdin, right? A king cobra that big. I just think it would be fun. Really, that's just right off the bat. I was gonna put it. I think it'd be fun. You know, I'm gonna put it under Moose because I think Moose is just such a more unique idea, because I think snakes have been done quite a bit. But you know, look, he's called the king for a reason, the King Cobra. I'm just saying. All right. Next up, walrus. Okay. Again, not the most intimidating creature when you look at it from the direct point of view. Okay, I understand that, but hear me out. A walrus, theoretically, if it had it out for you, would actually be very dangerous. Okay. I want you to think about this. A walrus is semi-aquatic, which, well, actually primarily aquatic, but it can still move on land, all right? But it can move enough probably to get you at slower speeds, okay? But imagine, right? You're a researcher stranded in the Arctic or something, you know? You're maybe something's going wrong with your power station, you're going outside. Maybe there's some animals that are getting really desperate for food, okay? You go out, and all of a sudden there's this kind of walrus just staring at you, and you don't really know why. And all of a sudden you get a little closer and get closer. It starts getting a little bit more aggressive. Maybe it has a mate nearby. Maybe it has a child, right? You never know. And all of a sudden, BAM! Tusk through the arm, all right? And look, I just think about it. If a walrus acted like a pursuit predator in its prime environment, that is actually extremely terrifying. Think of it the same thing of like a saber-toothed tiger, all right? A saber-toothed tiger on land is lethal. A saber-toothed tiger in water, which is in certain ways, even though it's not like a feline, but it has, because of the weapons it has available, it's like a saber-toothed tiger in the water. If you wanted it to be, it has potential. I'm gonna put it in potential over platypus. Actually, no. Yeah, you know, over platypus, but under a turtle, a snapping turtle, because I feel like snapping turtles can move both more accurately on water and land, and I know platypus isn't immediately as intimidating as a walrus, so I'll put it there. Next up, tiger. All right, there are certain categories of animals which they will, what you might call a man-eater. A man-eater is specifically an animal that where like they will not just eat humans as a last resort, but they will go out of their way to hunt humans when available. A tiger is one of the very few species that falls into that category, okay? If there hasn't been direct horror movies, a quality, like, decent budget horror movie about tigers already that I just haven't heard of, that would surprise me. Because the fact that a tiger horror movie hasn't been made, as long as I'm just not seeing or, like, hearing about that kind of movie for some reason, is kind of criminal. Because, again, a tiger is one of the few animals where realistically it will go after you. It will see you as food. Okay, not only that, but here's the thing: lions get all like the quality rep, like they say, like the lion's the king of the jungle. No, no, no. Number one, the lion doesn't live in a jungle. I mean, I guess historically there have been certain lions that have lived in or near jungles, but historically speaking, most lions, from what I've heard, have lived either in like plains or cave areas. At least some of the, like, there's like cave lions in the past, which might be another fun animal to talk about in a prehistoric version of this video. But lions mostly live in the savannah, okay? Lions don't live in the jungle. Tigers do. Tigers live in the jungle. And in fact, one of the reasons why tigers have so effective camouflage is because a lot of animals can't see as like vivid of color as tigers actually are with the orange. But what the stripes do is they actually act like a lot of like really tall grass. Like they mimic those kind of patterns. And that's one of the reasons why they're such like effective ambush predators. And the fact that like you trying to hide from a tiger in the jungle, that's just, it screams quality concept. Imagine just The Predator, like that movie, but instead of the Predator, it's just a tiger. Just saying. Just saying. At the very minimum, I think, you know what? Yeah, that'd be epic. I'm going to put it above a gorilla, actually, just because it is a man-eater. And gorillas aren't, again, they're not carnivorous. They're omnivorous, from my understanding, if not mostly herbaceous. But a tiger, carnivore through and through. All right, next. Snail. Yes, snails are not automatically intimidating, but if you have seen the inside of a mouth of a snail, if you knew how terrifying a snail would be just scaled up, I think you would change your tune. Okay? Number one, at that size, they're going to be harder to damage because of all the slime they produce, and it's going to easily, like, weapons are going to more easily slide off them, especially if you have to resort to melee weapons as opposed to firearms, depending on the situation, in which theoretically, in whatever script you would make, you would encounter a giant snail. But just, look, hear me out. Like, there have been some cool depictions of snail monsters in the past. I think one of my favorite ones is, I think, like, the Rugrats Goes to Paris, where it's like that weird, like, slime monster mech, where, like, he battles Reptar, or, you know what I mean? Have you ever seen that one? Not the first Rugrats movie, but, like, I think it was the second one. All right? But there have been snail or slug-like animals in the past that have been good villains. Actually, you know what? One of the things I thought of why this would make a good horror movie villain is specifically, if you've ever seen or read the Del Toro Quest books, which is one of my favorite book series growing up, or watched the anime that the original book series was made into, which is also good. I actually have it. Where? Oh yeah, you probably can't see it, but it's like on the very top shelf of one of my shelves. I have the Del Toro Quest anime. I found it, and then like I kept it because there's no way I'm not buying it when I found that it was available, because you never know when that's going to be available again. All right. Quality anime. But in that series, there's basically this giant, like, slug-like creature. I think it's called, like, Glurk or something, or Gluzz? It's called Glizzy. No, that's funny. It's not called Glizzy. We'll call it Glurk for now. Glurk is a giant slug that is in a giant underground maze full of stalagmites with, like, water that glows in the dark because it's got some, like, probably, like, you know, what is it like? Are they like amoeba or something? And that's what makes the water glow in certain areas of the world. But it's like that, but like in an underground cave system. And it's literally this animal, because it has no bones in this situation, this kind of monster, because it's a slug, not a snail. But again, snail works. It can go between like all these different like cracks like of the cave like an octopus, because it has no bones. And it's just a slow pursuit predator. It finds you, it doesn't even see well, and it just uses sound. All right? You could make an entire movie about that one thing, even from that book alone, let alone making your own story about a snail. I think snail has a lot of potential. In fact, again, I think all these animals have potential off the bat, but I know it's not what you immediately think of. But bees are more dangerous inherently, even though there are like venomous, I think like sea slugs and snails, like a cone snail. But actually, you know what? I think slug has more potential than a bee. I just do. I think if you do a snail right, especially when you scale it up, snails can be a lot faster than you would think. All right, next up, polar bear. All right, earlier when I was talking about tigers, I mentioned man-eaters. Polar bears are another one of those animals where they are man-eaters. A polar bear is the only purely carnivorous bear in the world that lives in the Arctic. And here's the thing. If you go into the Arctic and you see a polar bear, all right, there's only a certain amount of things you can do. If you see a black bear, like for some reason in your life, maybe try to make yourself look a little big, try to scare it away a little bit, if you're at a decent distance. Grizzly bear, play dead, hope and pray it damages you like less than you would hope it would before you can crawl to the hospital. A polar bear, get to shelter and pray. That's your only hope. okay? Because a polar bear only sees you as food. It lives in the Arctic, which means that it has no plant matter available to eat, so its digestive system is specifically designed to consume you. Its teeth are massive. It is pound for pound larger, taller, stronger than a grizzly. It will come after you, no questions asked, unprovoked, okay? Imagine this entire movie, just somebody in the Arctic trying to survive against a polar bear, trying to outwit it, whether it be like trying to hide in caves or trying to bury yourself in certain layers of snow to where it couldn't smell you. Although now that I think about it, I don't think that would be effective because I think they can smell like seals from underneath the ice, and that's why they like pound on the areas to try to get them, depending on like where they are. And especially if you can like cut a seal off from like its air hole, we know where it comes up for air. Excuse me, sorry. When I talk this much, I get the burps. All right? A polar bear is terrifying. Imagine like The Thing, the movie, the alien movie, but it's just a polar bear trying to get you in the Arctic. That is terrifying. And also, look, I think more horror movies should be set in or around the winter or snow, okay? Because I think just because like the color, not to be graphic, but like the color of blood is just such like a direct dichotomy to like the pure white, beautiful like color of snow. It creates a lot of opportunities for some really good shots on film. And because it's a man-eater, I'm going to put polar bear actually at the top of money. I think polar bear is easily one of the most easily replicatable animal to put in a creature feature film, okay? Next up, frog. Yes, a frog is not an inherently dangerous animal. Yes, there are poisonous dart frogs and things like that. The picture I chose, I think, was like an African bullfrog, just because I think they're one of the most intimidating looking frogs. But basically, I'm saying there's a lot you can do. Again, you'd have to do the same thing with a platypus. You'd have to scale it up. When you look at a frog's strength, all right? It has a prehensile tongue, which means it can shoot it out, and especially when you scale it up, it could probably at least grab somebody or grab like a limb and try to pull it into their mouth. I think that's something you could do. Also, you know, if you go like the freaking mutation route, you can give it bigger teeth and whatever, all that kind of stuff. Also, off the bat, if you scale a frog up, they're super strong jumpers, which means they're super agile. They're going to be harder to pin down, you know, whether with a firearm or otherwise, you know what I mean? And also, depending on how big a frog is, you know, they do have, like, a lot of, like, blubber. You know what I mean? Not blubber, but you know what I mean? Like, a frog is a pretty bloated-looking animal. I feel like you might be able to get away with certain surface wounds. And also, again, they are amphibious, which means they can go in land or in water. Their only weakness, I would say, is that they would have to rely mainly on water. Although, I think there are some species... No. Or that would a frog that just like doesn't need water just be a toad? I'm trying to think about that. Or are there specifically genetic things that distinguish the two, and then there are certain just land-bound frogs? There might be a possibility. Look, I do have my degree in anthrozoology, but it's been a while since I've studied some stuff. All right? But anyway, look, I think frog has some potential, and plus I think frogs are inherently cute animals, and I like when cute things are kind of like used in a horror sense. I think there's a lot of fun things you can do with just, you know, giving the unexpected in a horror movie. I think it's fun. I'm going to put it at the bottom of potential. It's fun, you know? Next up, and lastly, cassowary. All right, a cassowary, for those of you who don't know, a cassowary is one of the most dangerous birds in the world. I don't think they are active flyers in terms of like, kind of like an ostrich, but they have they're super territorial from what I've heard, and they have like massive claws that they can use to basically just embowel you. And I think they are like more hunter versions of like a bird. And also, look, there's so much stuff you can do. They basically look like the most dinosaur looking bird you can find. All right. And they are extremely dangerous from what I've heard just off the bat because of the rep. And look, I don't know everything about cassowaries, but from what I've heard, they have a pretty like good rep. You know, yeah, the streets know about the cassowary. Okay, I'm gonna put it in. You know what? At the very least, it sounds fun. All right, you know, there's a lot of cool animals out there you can do stuff with, even if it's animals you aren't expecting. All right, so that is my list for animals I think would make some pretty solid creature feature villains. Tier list. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please hit that notification bell. Come on back. God bless. We appreciate you coming. Have a great day.